What do you get when you put a Scotsman, an Englishman and an Irish woman in a TV studio? I'm not sure yet. You'll find out in the next 13 minutes. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and we'll find out from Chris Gilmour, an investment analyst with Absa Wealth Investment Management, which side of the Scotland independence divide he sits on. Chris Bishop, Forbes editor-in-chief, wearing a British Airways flight attendant's tie. I'm guessing I know which side he sits on. And Ann Crotty, senior journalist at the Sunday Times. And if you think she's independent, well, she's from Ireland, and they went through this in a non-democratic way in the 1920s. So we'll talk all about that this evening, all about Scottish independence. But I first want to show everybody what Chris Gilmour looks like under the desk, because unfortunately our TV studio is somewhat restricted in terms of our ability to get you to stand up and dance a little bit, Chris Gilmour. So you've got under there a sporran. A sporran is what exactly, Chris Gilmour?
It is the old-fashioned version of what the Americans refer to rather unglamorously as the fanny pack.
Excellent. So it did have a use, did it? And it's covered in seal fur.
Yeah, it's made of seal and leather, and you stick your cell phone in it these days, and your wallet and your keys and stuff like that, yeah.
Excellent. So what do you keep in your sock?
In the sock, you keep a ski and do.
What is a ski?
It's a wee stabbing dagger.
A lethal weapon.
Yes.
And on the other side, you've got one that's even more impressive. Now, put weapons on the table.
Right, weapons on the table. There we go.
The McDonald's have been paying. My goodness me, that's lethal.
It is rather, isn't it?
Is that legal?
Well, it's a bit ceremonial, isn't it? I mean, it's not sharp. You see, look, it's not. It might stab you, but it's not sharp.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And then your fancy shoes, your lady ballet shoes on the feet.
Oh, aye, the brogues, you see.
Are those proper brogues?
Oh, yes.
There we go. Chris Gilmour in full gear. And what tartan is that?
That's Ancient Morrison.
Who?
Ancient Morrison, or Hunting Morrison.
Hunting Morrison. Okay, who are the Hunting Morrisons? Well,
just Morrisons, but just it's the kind of dark version. It's the ceremonial version. It's not the day-to-day one.
Well, that's very nice. I'm guessing that when it comes to Scottish independence, you have an opinion.
Yeah, well, I was saying to Chris Bishop earlier, I didn't really think much about it until fairly recently. And
nor it would seem at the British government.
Yeah, well, yeah, precisely. It was a rather opinionated taxi driver in Edinburgh some years ago who said to me, well, the Scottish National Party are going to win the Holyrood elections. And I thought, nah, he can't be serious. And of course they did in a coalition, and then, 3-4 years ago they won in 2011 with an outright majority, which I think the chap who designed the Parliament, Donald Dewar, bless his cotton socks, he's no longer with us, he designed it so that no party in his estimation would ever win a majority. But of course they did it, and I think they've been fairly successful in the past few years.
Well, they're going neck and neck according to the opinion polls. You're wearing your British Airways steward's tie, Chris Bishop.
Well, I found this while I was groping in the dark this morning, so I thought maybe this is a sign, the three colours still together with the blue.
I mean, you sound very posh in English. You're not really, but let's pretend that you are.
I'm from Worcestershire, which is very posh.
Very
I just
posh.
want to put that out.
How dumb is it for the Scots to want independence?
I mean, I understand people. I'm a journalist. I believe in liberalism. People deciding who they want to be, where they want to be, who they want to be ruled by. I believe in the ballot box. I still believe there are fairies at the bottom of my garden, right? But what I'm saying is, myself, I am hoping for a no vote. Personally, I think...
And no means Scotland and Britain
states together. I mean, I think, all intents and purposes, I know we all joke, but 300 odd years fought shoulder to shoulder, work shoulder to shoulder as a country. I think that it would be a terrible shame if we look at each other across the border and say, right, you're nothing to do with us anymore. You're a foreigner, bye-bye.
307 years.
Yes,
I mean, but the animosity does run deep. I sat on a British Airways flight to the United Kingdom, still the big one, a couple of months ago next to a Scottish lass. And I got an education about Scotland that scared the living daylights out of me. People hate, there is still a great, we think the Anglo-Boer War is bad and Afrikaners and English people in South Africa. The Scots and the English, in some cases, not much love lost.
No, you're right. And it's a great pity, and I think this debate, from what I've seen from this afar, and I was in Scotland a few weeks ago and saw it a bit closer, but I think a lot of that, hopefully a lot of that animosity no longer exists. And I think it's good that the debate has been relatively emotionless and dealing with the issues, of which there are plenty. But you're quite right, and I think there's a lot of this residual stuff, mainly on the west coast of Scotland, from which I do not originate originally. Yes, it's a pity because it's very unhelpful, and it's really not what you want to see.
It's all the Celtish blood, I suspect. Ann Crotty in Cape Town. Your dad was an Irish politician, wasn't he? I mean, he was part of the independence movement in Ireland.
He was part of the independence movement, but not the original one in 1920.
No, because that would date you, and we couldn't have that.
Yes, yeah, it would. No, he was looking for more independence from the EU, and he won some referendums, or he won the right of the Irish to have referendums every time there were major changes to the EU laws. Which was quite an achievement, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, Ireland went through a civil war to get independence from Britain. That was in the 1920s. We've all seen the movie Michael Collins to give us just an insight as to what it was all about. And of course, Northern Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom, but it has led to huge sectarian issues. But the Irish economy, it's been through its ups and it's going through its downs right now, is perhaps proof that there is scope for an independent economy, because this is ultimately what it should be all about.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, I think the South Africans have done much better with independence in the first 20 years than Ireland has. I think Ireland has wasted an awful lot of its independence, of its right to govern itself. And I think, if the yes vote win on Thursday, the important issue is how good will they be at governing themselves. I think there's huge amounts of disinformation coming out, and a lot of bullying by big corporates who are saying that they're going to move south of the border. But it will depend on how well the Scottish people themselves and the leaders are able to govern themselves. Then, they may attract a lot more people. I'm afraid in Ireland's case, we didn't do very well at governing ourselves, and still don't, which is why Ireland had to join the EU.
We sit here in South Africa, and we kind of a little bit like people who sit in Great Britain and the United Kingdom, look south and see everybody as the same. We look north and we see everybody is the same. Sorry, Chris Gilmour, don't stab me with one of those. But the reality is that the histories run deep. The Gaelic histories run deep. The spirit of independence, Ann Crotty, runs deep.
Yeah, it runs very, very deep. And I think that one of the probably urgent issues that have increased the support for the yes vote in the last probably 10 years has been the centralisation of power within the three major British parties. So instead of having dispersed kind of accountability amongst the Conservative Party, Labour, and Lib Dems, it's all been centralised. And that makes the kind of the sense of feeling peripheral and abandoned and on the edge much greater for the Scottish people. I mean, it's Labour. What happened to Labour under Blair was shocking. They centralised all of the decision making to the head office in Westminster or in London. So it was inevitably going to alienate all of the regions.
I love the way we can blame Tony Blair for practically everything, including the Islamic State and now the Independent Republic of Scotland. Let's assume that you guys in kilts win it and you get your independence from the United Kingdom. What happens then, Chris Gilmour?
Bruce, you put your finger on a very, very difficult one. I actually don't know.
And I bet you anybody who's going to vote yes, we want independence doesn't know either. They just want independence.
Right, absolutely. There was a 600-page document that Alex Salmond and the SNP put out some months ago. And even, I haven't waded through it, but I mean, I've read extracts from it. And even then, it's remarkably difficult to try and work out exactly what's going on. The currency, for example, and this is the one-trick pony Alistair Darling's favourite subject, is the currency. But it is a serious issue, To have a currency union isn't going to work if the other parties don't want to be part of it, That manifestly, I think Jim Sillars referred to it as stupidity on stilts. So that's got to be ironed out. things like passports, things like the NHS. I mean, David Cameron and his cohorts are busy undoing the NHS in many parts of the UK. And that, I think, is one of the cornerstones of the SNP. That would change very much, I think, in independent Scotland.
I mean, you look at people who are dependent on the NHS, you look at people who live all over the world, expatriates, British expatriates, dependent on Westminster for pensions, for example, Chris Bishop. I mean, and suddenly Edinburgh's got to fund the pensions, the pension liabilities. I mean, this has got massive economic consequences. And it seems to be sort of predisposed on the fact that Scotland gets the North Sea oil. And that's by no means cut and dried either, is it?
But I think the wider issue that struck me in this whole debate is that when you look at it economically and socially, outside of the southeast, the very soft and well-heeled southeast, the rest of Great Britain gets the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
There's a lack of spending, there's a lack of political clout, etc., etc. And I think that maybe the good thing that will come out of this referendum and this debate is the fact that they should realise that the world doesn't stop at Watford Gap, whatever. There is another country there, and it's true. I mean, a lot of places in England have been neglected for decades, and you can't even compare them with the living standards in the south. That's something that I think that the central government should be thinking about now.
Ann Crotty, is Scotland better off independent, or does it need to stay part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
I've just seen a few of the figures which suggest that there isn't too much of a deficit, even if you kind of rule out how to calculate for the North Sea oil. I think it is better. I think it'd be really exciting to have a new independent entity that is not in Africa. It would be very exciting. And it's just fascinating to see how the establishment is bullying the yes campaigners. The threat of companies pulling out of South Africa, the threat of the EU not to allow them closer union with the EU. I mean, I think if the yes do win, those threats will disappear.
Yeah,
although,
she's always been a revolutionary as our Ann Crotty in Cape Town. Thank you, Ann Crotty. Do you get a vote, Chris Gilmour?
Unfortunately not. You have to live and reside in Scotland to get a vote.
So if you were in Scotland, what would you vote? With your head, not with your heart.
I suspect I'd probably vote yes, with the view that the Devo Max option is probably the one that's going to prevail.
And Devo Max is?
Devo Max means that you get a lot more in the way of powers being devolved to the Scottish Assembly, and you still remain part of the UK.
Because you want your cake and you want to eat it with a fork.
And that's what I think is going to happen on Friday. I think the Noes will just get it, but I think it's going to be a good day for Scotland.
But ultimately it goes down to democracy, and it goes down to, don't ignore us. We're a bunch of quite feisty folk north of the border. It gets quite cold and wet and dark for most of the year, which gives us a lot of time to sit inside and think about how to make your lives a misery in Westminster in future.
Absolutely, and I think it's the people saying how they want to live, which I think is to be encouraged anyway, and the EU certainly is going to see it that way. But I think that I agree with Chris, there's going to be a slight, possibly for the nose. You never know, these things can turn around quite quickly. But ultimately, I think that it's a time for everyone. We were talking earlier, maybe the whole of the country, the whole of the United Kingdom should have been included in the vote, saying, do we want to stay together, rather than do this 5 million people in the north of the country want to move apart? Maybe it should have been extended to everybody. Yeah. That's something that I think has only been raised very, very...
because nobody took it seriously. And now it's coming down to the wire. Is this legally binding?
Oh, it's legally binding. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
a done deal.
The 19th, is it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is the Dirk, and this is the...
Skiandu.
Skiandu. Aye. Well, that was Chris Gilmour, investment analyst, ironically, at Absa Wealth and Investment Management. Chris Bishop, the Forbes editor-in-chief, and Ann Crotty, senior journalist and counter-revolutionary at the Sunday Times, on the line to us from Cape Town this evening. Thank you for watching. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him to take these out of the building. They're pretty lethal weapons. Mel Gibson was in Lethal Weapon, and he was also in that other movie about Scotland. Braveheart as well. There we go. What a nice link. That's it from us for this evening. Thank you for watching. And don't be stupid, Scotland. Good night.